Live from our hurricane headquarters with real-time analysis from some of the nation's top meteorologists, this is Tracking the Tropics, powered by Bose Electric.
Beryl, now a tropical storm over the Yucatan, bringing unwelcome news this July 4th holiday weekend because the latest NHC track has the storm curving north, re-strengthening in the Gulf, and hitting Texas as a Category 1 hurricane in the coming days. We have the latest track plus an interactive Q&A coming up here on Tracking the Tropics. Welcome into your Hurricane HQ, folks. JB here with you alongside Tracking the Tropics meteorologist Rebecca Barry, joining us in the top right-hand portion of your screen, and our featured guest meteorologist from our Next Star sister station, Brianna Medina of the Valley Storm Team, joining us from KVEO in Brownsville, Texas, where things are certainly getting interesting. We're about to go over the latest track, the latest models that are coming in. We're really going to look at the GFS and the Euro. But before we do, we're paying attention to the Facebook pages, especially at KVEO and here at WFLA. We're going to be looking for your Facebook Live questions using hashtag Hey Brianna, hashtag Hey JB, and hashtag Hey Rebecca for meteorologist Rebecca Barry. And before we get to those questions, because a lot of them coming in, Rebecca, we'll send you over to the wall because this track has certainly taken a turn to the north over the last 48 hours.
Yes, unfortunately, the heat dome or ridge of high pressure that's really kept it in the southern Gulf is going to start to slide eastward a little bit, and that's what's allowing for that curvature further to the north. And the fact that the system has slowed down a little bit is what's leading to that big change in the track, because originally this system was supposed to still be screaming across the Gulf and making impact this weekend. If that had happened, it had been a far more southern impact, closer to Mexico than Texas. But the fact that we has slowed that timeline down a little bit has given time for that ridge of high pressure to drift eastward a little bit, allowing for that curvature. The system is not looking impressive after the interaction with Mexico here as it moved past Cancun and Tulum. You can see how much less convection there is. There's still evidence spinning. It was declared a tropical storm as of the 2 p.m. advisory, but it is moving right back over into the Gulf, where we'll be encountering a lot less shear than what it was leading up to this land interaction, and relatively warm waters. Nothing like the record warm waters that it just went through south of Cuba, just run-of-the-mill warm waters in the Gulf right now. The maximum winds currently at 70 miles per hour. The minimum central pressures come up quite a bit to 986 millibars. It's moving to the west-northwest at 15 miles per hour, and that's the slowest we've seen this system move. When we first started tracking Beryl, it was 22, 21, 20 miles per hour the whole way, but that land interaction slowing its forward motion down a bit, in addition to weakening it into a tropical storm. And so it will be encountering a little bit of wind shear as it initially enters the Gulf, but it gets into a much less sheared environment after Saturday evening. This is the Saturday 8 p.m. positioning here, still a tropical storm at that point, but we do expect it to re-intensify into a Category 1 storm by the time Sunday morning rolls around. This is the Sunday 8 a.m. positioning. This is the Sunday 8 p.m. positioning. And this is the Monday 8 a.m. position, potentially making landfall along the Texas coastline there, scraping Mexico here. This is the country line there between Texas and Mexico. And so Brownsville right there in the center of the track at this point. But we know that the track is for the center of the storm. And so the track could be as far north as the edge of this track right here, or as far south, and you have vastly different results if we deviate from the center of the track, which they often do. The track is just for the center. It's not suggesting that the storm will go down the center of that track. It then moves on as a big rainmaker towards Corpus Christi and eventually curves into Louisiana just as a rainmaker at that point. No tropical characteristics left with it other than that tropical moisture. And so the last Hurricane Hunter recon data we got was before the land interaction. And so this was early this morning, late last night, and so it was still pretty impressive at that point. They found a 10-second wind speed of 127 miles per hour, and that minimum central pressure was down to 962. And so they'll fly another recon mission once the center gets out over the Gulf, and that's when we'll get much better data on how this system survived and how much more it could recoup in terms of energy. We start to get really good data once the center gets out over the Gulf, and that's when we can fixate on that position. The models can take that information in, and usually about the second model run after the center gets out over and free from that land interaction is when the forecast track gets really tight and really, really confident. Well, right now we're looking at the two different main models, the GFS versus the Euro. So in the green lines here, that's the GFS. The red is the Euro. And what you can initially take from this, that the only difference is a couple hundred miles there as far as the center goes. But right now the GFS, see how many more pressure lines there are on the Euro than the GFS? The Euro is calling for it to intensify faster and become more well organized faster and deal less with that land interaction having an impact. And so as we continue this is through Sunday afternoon. Now we're looking at the GFS calling for still a pretty weak broad rotation much further north than the Euro, who's continuing to tighten up and continuing to show signs of organization and intensification. And as we move into Monday morning around 3 a.m., now we're looking at landfall scenarios, the GFS versus the Euro. And so the GFS has a Corpus Christi weaker storm. The Euro has a much tighter storm approaching Brownsville directly. And what we look at for when we're looking at landfall possibilities is the dirty side of the storm, as we call it. And so that's the onshore side to the north of the eye there. And so if we saw a GFS play out, north of Corpus Christi would get the worst of the storm surge and the worst of the winds. If the Euro were to play out, it would be squarely on Brownsville as far as that landfalling location goes. And north of that is where we would see the worst of the storm surge flooding and the worst of the winds. And I do want to bring in our expert, of course, our guest meteorologist, Brianna, because she's in Brownsville right now and, of course, can weigh in more heavily on what you guys are talking about in the weather office and what you're talking about in terms of expectations.
Yeah, that's right. We are trying to be very transparent with our community, tell them it's better to be safe and to prepare and to evaluate all of their plans just in case we have to take action. And we have seen the track shift further north, which is good news for us, but we're still warning people to watch out for areas that are prone to flooding, that are in low-lying areas, especially along the coast. That's one of our main concerns is coastal flooding. Not much of storm surge as of right now, but some things could potentially change as we get a little bit closer and we get more data runs. But again, it could be a rain event, and so that's why we're trying to let the community know and tell them what we could potentially have going into Sunday and Monday.
And it does look like the Euro's trending much stronger and a more direct hit for the Brownsville area. If the GFS were to play out, you guys would be on the weaker side of the storm in Brownsville, and that's when you'd probably be looking at more of a rain event as opposed to that coastal flooding. So hoping the track continues to shift a little bit further north for you guys at least.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's the best outcome that we could have, especially since we've been pretty dry these last couple of weeks, and some areas are under drought conditions, and our reservoirs are still a little bit lower than we would like them to be. So of course we're hoping for the best, but we are just making sure that everyone's prepared and they know what to do just in case. But we are showing all of the models as of right now, giving them option 1, option 2, or scenario 1, scenario 2, just so they can be well informed.
And it does continue to play out differently in terms of what you would see in inland Texas in terms of rain versus the GFS versus the Euro. The Euro sticking around for longer and remaining that a little bit stronger, whereas the GFS kind of races off and much less of a rainfall impact for the inland areas.
Right. Yes, that is correct. Yes. Yeah, we're just trying to be very transparent with our community. We've been showing the 2 outcomes just to make sure that they are well prepared just in case, especially for areas that are along the coast or in the lower part of the valley. That's really important to take those 2 scenarios into consideration. And it's always better to be safe than sorry because, again, we've just started hurricane season and we've already started to see some coastal erosion from Tropical Storm Alberto. So we did have some areas affected, even though it was just a tropical storm. So that's what we're telling the viewers in the community.
And for those eroded areas, let's look at the wave heights really quickly, because the wave heights start to pick up immediately once it gets away from the coastline of Mexico. By Saturday morning out in the middle of the Gulf, we're looking at 10-foot wave heights there. And as it continues to approach the coastline, we do get some areas with the 15-foot wave heights right along the coast. So for the eroded areas like you're talking about, this is probably a big danger.
Oh, yes. Yes, it is. And that's why Cameron County which is in just along the coast. I know that the mayor has issued a voluntary evacuation for those people who live in trailer parks. So a lot of those areas are really taking this serious, and as they should, just in case, because we had Tropical Storm Alberto come and it affected a lot of coastal areas. And so that's one of our main concerns as of now, especially since the track has shifted a little bit further north and there's still some uncertainty with the models.
Do you have areas along the coastline here that take longer to evacuate, similar to the Florida Keys in Florida? Do you have some areas that have to start preparing a little bit earlier just because of the structure?
Oh, yes, definitely. Areas just along the coast. So Boca Chica, South Padre Island, areas like that, we have to make sure that they're a little bit more prepared and have the option to evacuate if they choose to.
And you probably have a ton of people in the area for the holiday week that certainly didn't expect to be dealing with this. Is there some messaging and questions that you're getting from visitors?
Oh, yes, we've gotten a couple of emails to the station. We've actually done a story on that topic, what to do if you're on vacation in South Padre Island and how to stay informed and where to get the latest updates. So that is one of our concerns because South Padre Island is one of the hot spots for summer, for 4th of July, for spring break. And so we always try to make sure we have that angle because we know it's a big attraction, South Padre Island, and we have visitors constantly because it's almost perfect weather year round down here in the valley.
And the other big concern with this storm, I think you touched on it earlier, the winds, they do pick up to hurricane force briefly before landfall, but it's a very small wind field. And so once it does make its way on shore, it looks like the winds get out of the severe range just after Monday night at 10 p.m. and you're left with tropical storm force winds that disappear pretty quickly after that. But I'm a little more concerned about the rainfall for inland Texas. I mean, if we think back to hurricanes that brought tons of rain inland in Houston and caused flooding. And so this is the Euro, so this is the more worst case scenario for rainfall because it spends more time and moves more slowly. And so I just wanted to show this map because it's calling for 8+ inches of rain in some cases in the yellow here from Corpus Christi all the way up to Austin. So this could be not only a flooding concern, but also a travel concern because this is at the end of the holiday weekend, moving into when people might be trying to get back to work, trying to get back home. So I think rainfall is the secondary story with this system, especially since inland Texas does tend to flood pretty easily with the heavier rainfall. But you mentioned how dry it had been. Do you expect this to kind of catch you guys up from those drier conditions?
Oh, definitely. But it also depends on the track. So our reservoirs are in the upper valley, so on the other side. And so if we don't get as much rain toward that direction, then it might not help us as much as we need it to be, or we might not help. It might not help us as much as we need the help. But a lot of areas within the mid valley and lower valley still have a patch of dry conditions. So again, we've been pretty dry these last couple of weeks, and we did get a good amount of rainfall a couple of weeks ago with Tropical Storm Alberto, but it just wasn't enough to really help things out within our drought conditions. So some rain would be really, really beneficial for most of us, but it just depends on how much and where.
Really fortunate to have CBS4 of the Valley Storm team there at KVEO, meteorologist Brianna Medina joining us. She really, of course, understands the Brownsville market and can help us understand the conditions right now as far as what Texas is bracing for with Beryl and this northerly shift that we have with the track from the NHE. Tracking the Tropics meteorologist Rebecca Barry here with us live as well with the latest from the NHC. What we're going to do now, folks, is we're going to do our very best to answer your questions live out of the Facebook Live comment section. How that works, you see the hashtags all around our screen. You can use hashtag Hey Brianna, hashtag Hey Rebecca, or hashtag Hey JB. If you use one of those hashtags, we can feature your comment directly out of the Facebook Live comment section. So this opens up the live Q&A. Ask your questions now. We'll start here with BK on the WFLA Facebook page, hashtag HeyJB, saying, is Houston in the path? And while we are very focused, of course, on Brownsville and Corpus Christi, you know that we are going to have folks from Houston, from Dallas, from other sections, maybe even some fringe communities on the west side of Louisiana that are asking about potential impacts. Let's bring in Rebecca and Brianna here to answer this one about Houston from BK.
I'll let you take the lead, Brianna.
Okay, well, Houston, yeah, let me go ahead and see. Houston is in the forecast cone, but it's still a little uncertain as to what impacts Houston could encounter, but especially depending on the models. So it really depends on what outcome it would take. But like I said, it's better to be safe than sorry, and just kind of review the plan as of right now. Take today and tomorrow to kind of plan just in case and get your ducks in a row. It never hurts, especially since we should be doing a lot of these hurricane preparation steps since we're in hurricane season. But that's pretty much it.
Let's go to this one here from Lisa Ann. Hashtag KJB. When will we have the best prediction of how strong it will be when it actually hits Texas? I think it's fair to say, Rebecca, that Sunday is going to be a really pivotal day for Beryl, because that's when we're expected to get, that restrengthening, right, from tropical storm back to hurricane.
Absolutely. And so I think we'll start to get better information during the day on Saturday. I talked earlier about how forecast models aren't really great when a storm is interacting with land. Once the center of that storm gets back over the Gulf and we get the exact position of that and feed that into the hurricane models, they do a much better job, and there's a much higher confidence in the forecast, because if you look at the GFS and the Euro right now, they're so widely split. It's a vastly different day and it's a vastly different outcome in terms of rainfall, especially from the GFS versus the Euro. And so I think during the day on Saturday, we'll have a much better idea of where the system will end up geographically. I think during the day on Sunday is when we see if it actually is able to regain that strength back to a Category 1 hurricane.
Let's go to this question from Tammy joining us on Facebook Live. Hashtag Hey Brianna. We're going to send this one your way, Brianna. And it comes from Tammy asking anything for Wharton, Texas. And again, I had to look up exactly and want to make sure I was certain as to where Wharton, Texas is. That is southwest of Houston and directly west from Galveston, a bit inland, so not directly there on the Texas coast.
Right. So it would be the same thing that we kind of discussed for Houston. It really just depends on the outcome of Beryl and which way it's going to track. But we'll know more information later today and tomorrow. But of course, it's always best to evaluate your hurricane preparedness plan just in case. What helps is that the area is further inland, but still, it really just depends on the track that Beryl takes.
Let's go to Dan on the WFLA Facebook page. Hashtag Hey Rebecca. Any chance the winds would change and shift it towards Florida? We've seen some pretty extreme curves in the past, but this, no way, right?
No, we still have our ridge of high pressure, or heat dome as we call it, over northeastern Florida. It is starting to drift a little bit eastward, and that's one of the reasons that this curvature is allowed. Air goes clockwise around a high pressure, and so that's the general steering current that's keeping this system in the southern Gulf at this point. And then once it clears that high pressure, it does start to curve northward, but it's not headed towards Florida. We don't have anything to worry about.
That's good news. But Louisiana now may be slightly different. Elizabeth asking this question on Facebook Live. Brianna, I'm going to send this your way. Is Louisiana in the path? And while Louisiana itself really isn't in the cone right now, as Rebecca noted earlier, there's still a chance that Louisiana sees some precipitation from Beryl, which was a Category 5 hurricane just a few days ago, but by the time it would have any impact on Louisiana, it would be nothing close to that.
Oh no, I don't believe so. But Louisiana could get some rain as well, and the majority of the rain could just stick to the western part of the state. But again, we're not expecting a heavy amount of rain for Louisiana. I think that's mainly going to be in Texas.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're looking here at the Euro rainfall totals that you brought up, Rebecca, and here I am saying it wouldn't be that bad, but there's a corner of northwest Louisiana there that could see rainfall totals of 5 inches or more, maybe, right?
Yeah, but remember, this is the Euro, which basically holds it together longer and doesn't move it out very quickly. And so this is kind of the worst case scenario in terms of rainfall. So this is probably the highest estimation you could see, because the areas in yellow indicate upwards of 8 inches of rain. And unfortunately, you get into more terrain, when you work into this part of the country. And so when you have terrain, it can exacerbate flooding because when the water hits the higher areas, it all goes to the lower areas. And that's when you get flooding that happens fast. And so that would be my concern. It's almost like when we have those storms move from the Outer Banks into the inland Carolina areas, and they can sometimes cause catastrophic flooding, hundreds of miles from the coastline.
Yeah, this just freezing on this graphic is interesting for a second, right? Let's just everybody pinpoint on the areas that are of the brightest yellows and oranges on here. Because, again, if you believe the Euro, and a lot of people are Euro super fans out there who believe that the Euro can do no wrong.
Yep.
This is a major rainmaker for San Antonio, for Austin, and then moving even towards some Dallas suburbs into Arkansas. Look at that. I mean, seeing it in excess of 4 inches of rain, potentially.
Yeah. It could be really impressive if this were to be this solution that ends up, taking the lead.
I mean, just, again, so fascinating that this was a Category 5 hurricane weakening to a tropical storm hitting the Yucatan, could become, once again, a hurricane to the south of the Texas coast, hitting Texas as a Cat 1 hurricane, and then bringing all this rain into multiple states. Pretty wild that we're talking about this on the July 4th holiday weekend. Let's go back to Brianna here because we've got Gabby on Facebook Live asking about Abilene, Texas, getting any rain out of this hitting the Lone Star State.
I believe so. Yes, Abilene would be getting some rain, but it really depends on how much. And we don't really know that just yet. We'll know a little bit more as we get closer. So later today, early tomorrow, but it's looking like Abilene will be getting some rain.
This is a last call, folks, for your questions and comments on Facebook Live while we have a pairing of great meteorologists here. Rebecca Barry here with the Max Fender 8 Storm Team at WFLA in Tampa, of course, from KVEO in Brownsville, the southern tip of Texas, from the Valley Storm Team meteorologist Brianna Medina. You can use hashtag #HeyRebecca or hashtag #HeyBrianna to reach either of the two of them in the coming 5 or so minutes as we end the interactive Q&A portion of the live stream. Anne Marie wanting to know, for all of us, can it possibly turn back to the west again? So I guess this is a great question, Rebecca, right? Because what Anne is getting at is that if this does move more west, is there a chance that this storm never actually does make a landfall in the continental U.S.?
There's a small possibility, but I'll show you the forecast model so that you can see the confidence in the forecast track and that curvature. And so what we're seeing is that's a pretty tight line. There's only one outlier that keeps it in Mexico there, and it's very close to the border. It would end up essentially still raining and getting a lot of windy conditions in Texas even with that. But those are the forecast models, so there's a pretty tight consensus. And when you look at the forecast models, it is airing on the northern side of that track. There are more lines on the north than there are in the south, which is an indication we may see the track continue to shift a little bit further north. And so as we work into the latter parts of the forecast, they're still pretty consistent in that path there. And so that high confidence leads me to believe that's not necessarily a great possibility.
Brianna, anything to add there?
No, I agree, especially because hurricanes naturally go on a north path. And what was stopping it was that upper level ridge of high pressure that was along southeast part of the United States, but it's going to shift and weaken. And so it's just going along its natural path. So I agree. It's very unlikely for it to turn west.
Let's go to David here. Hashtag #HeyRebecca, wanting just to know about storm surge. What kind of storm surge impacts we could see on the Texas coast as Beryl is expected to re-intensify to a Cat 1 storm?
And I was looking at the storm surge models earlier, and they don't seem to be running with a great... I couldn't pull up any of the data for Texas, so I'm going to have to deflect to Brianna here about the conversations you guys have been having. You saw Alberto as a much weaker system, but this won't be too much stronger. What do you expect in terms of surge?
Well, for here in areas of the Rio Grande Valley, we're not really expecting much of storm surge. It's just going to be coastal flooding. That's going to be the main issue for us. So again, that's where we're trying to highlight and pinpoint and kind of let residents know that live a little bit closer to the coastal areas what could potentially occur. But again, we're not really seeing or expecting much of storm surge.
Let's go to this one here from Lauren on Facebook Live. Hashtag #HeyRebecca. What are your thoughts on what Memphis, Tennessee, and North Mississippi we'll see from the tropical system. This is what we're just talking about. While Texas is going to get all the headlines, so to speak, over the coming 48 hours, there are other states that could get impacted by a lot of rain.
Absolutely. And so what our worry with inland rain is, especially as the system weakens and you don't have that strong distribution of rain around the center, areas of convection tend to stall out or break apart from the main areas, and they can sit there. And that's the worst case scenario, is that you have rain sitting there and dropping inches and inches and inches of rain. We're still looking at the Euro, which is on the heavier end of the rainfall totals, but this is headed into western Tennessee, in those areas, and especially in the more mountainous regions. 4 to 6 inches of rain can be a disaster for low-lying zones just because of the terrain there. So that's my concern with the inland rain as the system starts to work its way across the country.
As far as speed, I want to really quickly, I'd like to ask about speed for a second. What's the current speed of the storm? It's over the Yucatan right now.
Yeah, I think
Beryl.
It's 16 miles per hour, which is the slowest we've seen it.
Right, because it was
15,
racing at a nice 20-mile-per-hour clip there for a while when we were tracking it into Jamaica. But as far as when it reaches the Texas coast, do we have any idea as to how, where the speed? Because for our audience watching at home, we want the speed to stay up. The speed to just blow over Texas, and then it's less of a rain event for the coast. And
so here's what we can gain from the track here. The icons are 12 hours apart, so you can see how fast it's moving over the Gulf. And then the icons get a lot closer together over the land, probably by about half because of that slower forward motion. And so if it's moving around 15 miles per hour over the Gulf, it'll probably slow down to about 7 to 10 miles per hour once it hits land.
Yeah, not great news for you guys, Brianna, because the slower it is, the more it could kind of sit over you guys and dump a lot of rain.
Right. Yes, that's one of our main concerns too. If it kind of stalls out, we do have some drought conditions, but there's only so much that we could take. So again, we're just letting the public know, and 2 different outcomes that can occur.
Well, I encourage folks to follow the Valley Storm team out of our sister station KVEO, CBS4 in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas. Really appreciate Brianna Medina, who's going to have a pretty busy 72 hours ahead. Brianna, any final thoughts on the storm? And I should also point out, it's crazy because we were talking about South Padre Island before, and I thought to myself, my goodness, why does that sound familiar? That's where all the shark attacks have been happening this weekend. So, maybe not the worst time for people to be getting away from the Texas beaches with a hurricane potentially knocking on your doorstep, Brianna. But we're going to be, of course, watching Beryl closely, as I'm sure you will as well.
Oh, yes, definitely. All of the Valley Storm team is going to be working in shifts throughout these next couple of days to make sure that we are putting out the most up-to-date information to let people know what to do and what's going to happen these next couple of days and how to be prepared in case we have to take action.
Brianna, folks, give her a follow, of course, on social media. We appreciate her time, appreciate everybody watching at home. We'll be tracking what is now Tropical Storm Beryl, expected to re-intensify to Hurricane Beryl in the hours ahead. We'll be here, of course, in your hurricane headquarters in Tampa, Florida, monitoring things with our next star sister stations across the country with Hurricane Beryl. And, of course, really quickly, by the way, 96L, kind of an afterthought now for the most part.
It's a non-starter. They flew through it. They didn't find anything.
Yeah, we were, as the week progressed, folks, there was a storm that was behind Beryl, and it just is less of a factor now. And that's, of course, good news because it was following a very similar path as Beryl. We're tracking it all here at Tampa with our next star sister stations across the country. We have, of course, regular episodes of Tracking the Tropics every Tuesday at 12:30 Eastern, 11:30 Central. And then, of course, we have additional episodes like this one when storms form. So, of course, keep it locked to us for all the latest on the 2024 Atlantic hurricane season. One more time, a thank you to Brianna for joining us. A thank you to meteorologist Rebecca Barry. I'm JB Buno. We'll see you next time here on Tracking the Tropics. Stay safe, folks.
Find Tracking the Tropics on these platforms. And for storm updates, the latest models, and helpful resources, visit trackingthetropics.tv.